Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're jumping right into a completely fascinating intersection of modern consumer habits and legendary music history. We're going to unpack the totally unexpected demographics behind the massive modern vinyl boom and, incredibly, trace this trend all the way back to the enduring physical legacy of the greatest band of all time, the Beatles.
Okay, let's dive into this and map out our journey. We'll start off with the Gen Z vinyl boom. Then, we'll look at supporting artists in stores. From there, we hit the Beatles' vinyl sovereignty, before shifting back to 1969 to examine their rapid-fire creative genius. And finally, we'll break down the anatomy of a hit.
Section 1. The Gen Z vinyl boom and how it's subverting our expectations about physical media.
You know, if you assume physical media is just some nostalgic relic kept alive purely by older generations holding on to the past, recent data completely flips that assumption on its head. So I've got to pose this question directly to you. Who do you think is really driving the current vinyl resurgence? Who is actively shelling out cash for heavy, tangible records when we literally have tens of millions of songs available instantly in our pockets?
Well, the answer is Generation Z. According to a really comprehensive report by the Vinyl Alliance, a staggering 80% of Gen Z respondents actually own a record player. 80%! And furthermore, 76% of them report buying vinyl at least once a month. This isn't just a passing hipster fad, right? It's a deliberate, sustained rebellion against the disposable nature of the digital streaming era.
Moving to Section 2, supporting artists in stores and why the youth actually prefer crate digging.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is that it's not just the sheer volume of records this younger generation is buying, it's exactly how and where they are shopping that reveals a vital shift toward community. An overwhelming 84% of Gen Z vinyl fans prefer buying their records from physical, brick-and-mortar stores. I mean, think about that. In an age of algorithms and one-click digital delivery, they are actively choosing to step into physical locations, thumb through crates, and connect with a tangible music community.
So what's motivating this? Sure, 87% prioritize that warm, high-quality home sound. We all love that. And 64% seek out secondhand stores for rare albums because they love the thrill of the hunt. But the absolute crucial point is this. 62% of these young fans buy physical records specifically to offer tangible financial support to the artists they love. To put that into perspective, only 45% of Gen X fans report doing the same thing. For Gen Z, the record store is a vital hub for building community and truly empowering creators.
And the music industry is absolutely feeling this dynamic. When we look at Universal Music Group data, a really clear contrast emerges. Modern streaming provides immense volume but very low physical attachment. In fact, back in 2018, the Beatles' massive streaming numbers represented just 2.7% of UMG's streaming revenue for catalog acts. Physical vinyl, however, operates as a premium product. These premium physical editions drive major revenue, allowing older, legendary albums to massively outsell today's contemporary pop stars on the physical shelves.
Which brings us to Section 3, the Beatles' vinyl sovereignty, the timeless catalog ruling modern sales.
With the youth rushing back to record stores, you might expect modern contemporary artists to completely dominate. But no, the ultimate benefactors of this physical music resurgence are actually timeless catalog acts. In fact, the Beatles confidently took the #1 spot as the best-selling artist at the UK's Atlas Records in 2024. Over half a century later, they beat out massive, iconic stadium acts like Pink Floyd, Queen, and David Bowie as the absolute kings of physical retail.
And when we dig into modern search and sales data, we see exactly which pieces of their catalog are pulling this weight. Abbey Road remains the undisputed, most consistently searched and purchased vinyl classic. While incredible albums like Let It Be and Rubber Soul show only minimal or sporadic search interest, Abbey Road maintains these consistent, high peaks year-round. It is literally the gold standard for premium physical media.
All right, Section 4, rapid-fire creative genius, and the intense 1969 Get Back sessions.
This raises a fascinating question. How was this timeless physical media actually produced? Let's jump back to January 1969 to examine the shockingly fast creative process that birthed the very records Gen Z is obsessed with tracking down today. When the band started the Get Back sessions on January 2nd, 1969, it had been a mere 10 weeks since their final session for the White Album. It was only 5 weeks since the White Album had been released globally to massive acclaim. Yet their goal was to write, rehearse, and record a brand new album completely from scratch in roughly 4 weeks, and this brilliantly illustrates just how totally insane that compressed schedule was.
What makes this compressed schedule even more incredible is the pre-session chaos. They hadn't used those few weeks off to prepare any material at all. George was in the US hanging out with Bob Dylan, John and Yoko were dealing with court appearances and literally recording experimental albums in a hospital, Paul was vacationing in Scotland and New York, and Ringo was just resting up. They walked into a cold, cavernous studio completely unprepared, relying entirely on raw pressurized collaboration to somehow conjure magic.
Which leads us to Section 5, the anatomy of a hit, building Get Back out of thin air.
Thanks to Peter Jackson's extraordinary documentary footage, we don't just have to guess how they pulled this off. We can visually break down their complex, rapid creative process by looking at the micro-story of just one legendary track. Let's move to and see how this builds, literally out of thin air. Step 1. Paul McCartney is spontaneously strumming his bass one morning, just waiting for John to arrive, and the driving melody for Get Back simply tumbles out of him. Step 2. For a few days, the song pivots into a protest song phase, directly addressing racism in British politics. Step 3. John and Paul sit face to face, throwing around these catchy but ultimately meaningless lyrics just to lock into that incredible groove. And finally, Step 4. Billy Preston joins the band on electric piano, giving the song the exact sonic texture it needed to become a massive #1 hit.
Economist and researcher David Pannell perfectly summarized this dynamic. He wrote, "Here is a group who are responsible for transforming the entire music industry. The whole process must have been like going through a tornado. And honestly, he hit the nail on the head. But it was that exact tornado of extreme efficiency and intense collaboration that birthed the physical artifacts that are still dominating shelves over 50 years later."
Which leaves us with a truly fascinating final thought to conclude this explainer. As Gen Z continues to flock to record stores, seeking out physical connections, community, and those half-century-old masterworks born out of pure studio chaos, will today's fast-paced digital music ever leave a 50-year physical legacy of its own? It's a question that completely changes how we view our own modern music libraries, isn't it? Thank you so much for joining me, and keep exploring.